Summer is supposed to be the season of freedom, the time for long road trips, late-night laughter around campfires, and days that blur into nights by the beach. But have you ever noticed how the very things that make summer so exciting can also make it terrifying? The isolation of a cabin hidden deep in the woods, the eerie silence of a deserted motel off the highway, or the shadows that seem to move just beyond the glow of the campfire. What if the memories you thought would be filled with sunshine and laughter turned into your worst nightmares? Think about it. You're far from home, surrounded by unfamiliar places and strangers you'll never see again. You convince yourself that sound outside the tent was just an animal, or that the figure you thought you saw at the edge of the lake was just your imagination. But what if it wasn't? What if someone or something was watching you the entire time? Vacations are supposed to give us a break from reality, but sometimes reality follows us, twisted into something far darker than we're prepared for. Tonight, we'll dive into 3 chilling true accounts of summer vacations that ended in fear instead of fun. These aren't stories of haunted mansions or ghost-filled cemeteries. They happened in places you might recognize a road trip with friends, a rented cabin, or even a quiet family getaway. Ordinary moments that spiraled into unforgettable nightmares. So before you pack your bags for your next trip, listen closely. These 3 stories might just make you think twice about the dark roads you drive down, the strangers you meet, and the shadows lurking where you least expect them. This is 3 scary true summer vacation horror stories. Story number 1. The empty cabin next door. The summer I turned 15, my uncle rented a lakeside cabin for a long weekend getaway. It was meant to be simple fishing, swimming, late nights by the fire with my cousins. The cabin sat tucked into the trees, far enough from town that you couldn't hear traffic, only the constant hum of cicadas and the occasional rustle of something moving in the underbrush. It felt safe in the way that places surrounded by family usually do. Safe and even a little boring. There were 2 cabins by the lake, nearly identical. Ours was lively, full of voices and laughter, but the one next to us was empty. Its windows were dark, its porch sagging just slightly, as though no one had walked across it in years. My uncle joked that it looked haunted, but then he laughed it off and said the owners only came during hunting season. We thought nothing of it at first. The first night, after a long day of swimming, I found myself awake later than everyone else. My cousins had passed out in a heap of sleeping bags on the floor, and my uncle was snoring from the bedroom. I sat on the porch alone, drinking a soda and watching the trees sway. Fireflies blinked in and out of the darkness, and for a while, I just listened to the crickets. That's when I noticed the window in the cabin next door. At first, I thought I saw movement, just the faintest shift of a shadow behind the glass upstairs. My eyes locked on it, but nothing happened. I told myself it was my imagination, or maybe the branches swaying in the wind casting strange shapes. Still, a knot of unease sat heavy in my chest. The next morning, while we were heading down to the lake, my uncle paused near the edge of the property. "Huh," he muttered, pointing at the dirt between the 2 cabins. Footprints, not boots, not shoes. Bare feet, pressed deep into the damp soil from the night's rain. They weren't ours. Everyone had been inside, asleep. My uncle shrugged it off, said maybe kids from town had been messing around. But we were at least 20 minutes from town. Who would come all the way out here, barefoot, in the middle of the night? I didn't say anything, but the thought gnawed at me all day. That night I went to bed early, but sleep didn't come easy. The room I shared with my cousin faced the woods, and moonlight cut pale bars across the floor. At some point past midnight, I woke to a faint sound. Tap, tap, tap. I lay there, stiff, trying to place it. It wasn't at our window. It was farther away, muted, almost hesitant. Slowly, I realized it was coming from the cabin next door. Someone was tapping on the glass. I whispered my cousin's name, but he only groaned and rolled over, still asleep. My heart pounded as I pulled myself out of bed and tiptoed to the window. The forest outside was dark, silent except for the tapping. I forced myself to look toward the empty cabin. At first, there was nothing, just the black shape of the building against the trees. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw it. A pale face staring back at me from the upstairs window, perfectly still, perfectly white, watching. I jerked the blinds shut and stumbled back into bed, pulling the blanket over my head like a child. I lay there shaking, every muscle in my body screaming to run, but I didn't. Eventually the tapping stopped, and the silence was almost worse. By morning, sunlight made everything feel stupid. I told myself I dreamed it. When my uncle found me quiet at breakfast, he asked what was wrong, and I told him about the tapping. He laughed, though not unkindly, and said it was probably branches brushing against the window. Cabin's locked up tight anyway, he added. Nobody in there. Still, after breakfast, he humored me and went with me to check. The cabin's porch groaned under our weight, dust puffing up from the boards. The door was chained shut with a rusted lock that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. We circled the place, peering through the grimy windows. Dust lay thick on the furniture inside. Empty, silent. I tried to believe it settled it. But that night, it happened again. I woke to the same sound tap, tappe, and this time it was louder, clearer. My cousin didn't stir, but I sat frozen in my bed, listening as the tapping grew faster, more insistent, like someone rapping their nails against the glass in frustration. Then it stopped. A silence hung heavy, so complete I could hear my own shallow breathing. Then came something worse, the faintest creak of floorboards. Not in our cabin, in the one next door. Slow, deliberate steps, moving from one end of the room to the other. I pressed my hand over my mouth, tears stinging my eyes, and prayed for the footsteps to stop. After a long, unbearable stretch of silence, they did. We left the next morning, cutting the trip short. My uncle claimed it was because of the weather, but I knew he'd heard something too. The way he avoided looking at the empty cabin when we packed the car, the way his jaw tightened, told me more than his words did. As we pulled down the dirt road, I glanced back one last time. For just a second, I swore I saw someone standing in the upstairs window, watching us go. Years have passed since that summer. I've stayed in other cabins, other old houses, and I've told myself again and again it was all in my head. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, when the house creaks and the air feels too still, I remember that pale face. And I wonder if the cabin was ever really empty at all. Story number 2. The rest stop on Highway 17. It was the last night of our trip, and I was driving Highway 17 with my girlfriend, Erin. We'd spent the week on the coast, soaking up the sun, burning our shoulders, drinking cheap beer on the sand, until the gulls cried us awake the next morning. We were both exhausted, our skin sticky from salt and sunscreen, our hair tangled from days of humidity. All we wanted was to get home, shower, and sleep in our own beds. The highway stretched endlessly through the trees, and once night fell, it felt like we were the only car left in the world. Our headlights carved a thin path into the dark, and the forest swallowed everything outside that narrow beam. Erin was asleep with her head against the window, and I kept the music low, one hand on the wheel, trying to blink away the heavy pull of drowsiness. Around 1 a.m., I decided we needed to stop. I was too tired to drive safely, and Erin would be cranky if I shook her awake just to switch. When the blue sign for a rest stop appeared, I took the exit. The place was small, just a squat brick bathroom building, 2 vending machines, and a few dim lampposts buzzing against the black. I pulled into the lot, the gravel crunching under the tires, and parked near the lights. There were no other cars, no truckers dozing in cabs, no travelers stretching their legs, just us. Erin woke up as I shifted into park. She rubbed her eyes and groaned. "Where are we?" "Rest stop," I said. "Bathroom break." She yawned and climbed out of the car, heading toward the building while I stayed behind. I leaned against the hood, taking a sip of warm water from my bottle. The night air was heavy, damp with the smell of pine and asphalt, and the silence pressed against me in a way that felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Soft at first, crunching against the gravel, somewhere beyond the glow of the lamps. I turned, expecting to see another traveler emerging from the shadows, maybe someone walking their dog. But instead, under the pale fluorescent light by the vending machines, stood a man. He was tall, gaunt, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame, like they were borrowed or stolen. His arms hung stiffly at his sides, and his head was tilted just enough to make me uneasy. He wasn't buying anything from the machines. He wasn't moving at all. He was staring at me. "Hey," I called out, trying to sound casual. My voice cracked anyway. The man didn't respond. He didn't shift, didn't blink, didn't even acknowledge I'd spoken. He just kept staring. My stomach twisted. I glanced toward the bathroom, silently begging Erin to hurry. My throat was dry, and I gripped the keys in my pocket so tightly they dug into my skin. I thought about getting into the car, but I didn't want to turn my back to him. When Erin finally came out, she froze as soon as she saw the man. She didn't say anything, but I felt her hand clutch at my arm as she reached me. "We're leaving," I whispered, and we both moved quickly to the car. The man never moved. His head turned just slightly as we passed, his gaze following us. And I swear, I saw his mouth twitch, like he wanted to smile, but couldn't quite remember how. We slid into the car, doors slamming louder than I intended, and I fumbled the keys into the ignition. As the headlights washed over him, I got a clearer look. His eyes were wide, too wide, and they didn't blink. Glassy and unchanging, like the eyes of a doll. His clothes were filthy, shredded in places, stained with something dark I couldn't place. I pulled out fast, gravel spraying behind us. Erin stared straight ahead, her face pale. Neither of us spoke for miles. The road was empty, except for the endless ribbon of white lines and the black forest pressing in from both sides. My chest felt tight, my heart hammering like I'd run miles. Finally, Erin whispered, "Did you see his eyes?" I nodded, my knuckles white on the wheel. "They looked dead," she said, barely audible. Like he wasn't alive. We didn't talk after that. Not until the lights of the next town appeared, and we pulled into a gas station just to breathe, to feel normal again. Later, when we told the story, people laughed it off. They said we were tired, that we'd scared ourselves. Some suggested he was homeless, some drifter. But I know what I saw. I know the way those eyes looked, fixed on me, hollow and endless. And sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, and I pass another rest stop, I can't help but glance toward the vending machines, half expecting to see him standing there, still, silent, watching. The strange part, the part I don't tell people, is that when I pulled back onto the highway that night, the rearview mirror caught something. Just for a second, before the lights disappeared, I saw him again, not standing by the vending machines anymore, standing at the edge of the road, facing us. And though we drove miles away, though the car was going 70, it felt like his glassy eyes were still locked on mine. Story 3. The third floor of the beach hotel. The summer we stayed at the Carolina coast was supposed to be the best trip of my teenage years. I remember how excited I was when my parents announced we'd be spending a whole week at the beach, in one of those old hotels right off the boardwalk. You know, the kind faded pastel paint on the outside, creaky balconies, salt-stained railings, and rooms that always smelled faintly of damp carpet, no matter how many times they were cleaned. It wasn't fancy, but it was close to the ocean, and that was all that mattered to me. We checked in late on a Sunday afternoon, still sticky from the long drive. The front desk clerk looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was flat and oily, and his eyes had that heavy, sunken look of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. He slid our room keys across the counter, then paused with one card still between his fingers. He glanced down at the number printed on it, then back at us, his jaw working slightly, as though he wanted to say something, but thought better of it. Finally, without a word, he let go of the card. Room 317. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. My little sister and I were too busy racing each other to the elevators, while my parents hauled luggage behind us. The elevator was slow and smelled faintly of mildew, the kind of enclosed space that makes you count the seconds until the doors slide open again. When they did, we stepped out into the hallway of the third floor. It felt wrong. The air was different there, cooler, heavier somehow. The lights buzzed, and one of the overhead bulbs flickered erratically, casting shadows that made the hallway look like it was breathing. The carpet was stained and threadbare, patterned with an outdated floral design that only seemed to highlight the dark spots. My sister wrinkled her nose and whispered, "Smells weird," and I had to agree. It smelled faintly of mold, and something else, something metallic, like rust or old blood. We unlocked our room and settled in, and for a while, everything was fine. The balcony overlooked the pool, and from there, we could see the ocean stretching endlessly, blue and shimmering. We spent the first 2 days in the sun, burying each other in sand, daring each other into the icy water, buying cheap t-shirts from boardwalk shops. By night, we ate pizza and taffy until our stomachs hurt. But on the third night, things changed. I woke up sometime after 2 a.m. At first, I didn't know what had pulled me out of sleep. The room was dark, the only sound the air conditioner humming softly in the corner. Then I heard it. Footsteps. They were faint, muffled by the carpet, but unmistakable. Someone was running down the hallway, back and forth, back and forth. The sound grew louder, faster, until it felt like whoever it was sprinting right outside our door. I sat up, holding my breath. The footsteps stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Then the doorknob rattled. It wasn't subtle. Whoever was out there twisted it hard, jerking it back and forth as if trying to wrench it open. I nearly shouted, but my voice caught in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the door, waiting for it to burst open. It didn't. After what felt like forever, the rattling stopped. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, that maybe I was dreaming. I lay back down, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling. But just as I began to convince myself, I heard it again, footsteps, slow this time, deliberate, moving away from our room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning at breakfast, I tried to tell my parents what I'd heard, but they brushed it off. Probably some drunk guests messing around, my dad said. You'll hear all kinds of noise in a place like this. But I couldn't shake it. That night, I stayed awake on purpose, determined to catch whoever was out there. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m. My eyes grew heavy, but I forced myself to sit upright in bed, staring at the door. The room was quiet, the only sound my sister's steady breathing. Then it started again. The footsteps. Faster this time. Louder. They tore through the hallway, pounding the carpet with frantic energy. I jumped up and ran to the door, pressing my ear against it. My skin prickled with goosebumps. The running stopped, dead silent, right on the other side. I froze. Then, slow and deliberate, the doorknob turned. It twisted to the right, then the left, back and forth. The lock held, but the pressure was strong enough to make the metal click. I backed away, whispering my sister's name, shaking her awake. She sat up grudgingly, but when she heard the rattling, her eyes went wide and she clutched my arm. We stayed like that until it stopped. The next morning, I went down to the front desk. The same tired clerk was there. When I told him about the noise on our floor, his face went pale. "You're on the third floor?" he asked, voice low. I nodded. He swallowed, glanced over his shoulder, then leaned in closer. "We don't book guests on that floor," he whispered. "Not anymore." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "We're in 317. His hand trembled slightly as he rubbed at his forehead. "Those rooms haven't been used in years. Maintenance keeps them locked, but—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Doesn't matter. We'll move you downstairs." I demanded to know what he was talking about, but he wouldn't say more. Just handed us new keys and begged us not to go back upstairs. My parents laughed it off, assuming it was some weird mistake, but I couldn't stop thinking about his words. Not booked anymore. Not for years. That evening, when we went to pack our things from 317, I noticed something I hadn't before. On the inside of the door, etched faintly into the wood near the knob, were scratches. Dozens of them, as if someone had clawed desperately from the inside, trying to get out. We moved to the first floor that night and left the hotel the next morning. My parents pretended nothing had happened. My sister and I didn't talk about it. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still hear it. The pounding footsteps racing up and down the hall, stopping suddenly outside my door. And when my house is quiet, when the air feels too still, I swear I hear the faint rattle of the doorknob turning, testing, waiting, and I can never be sure if I locked it.